I forgot to do the countdown, but we're on.
That's all right. What's up, everyone?
All right, hey guys, I am here with buddy Brandon. We are still waiting for the judges to count up, right? Let me know how the audio is. I mean, I'm not monitoring
in the
anything.
background. I don't know.
Yeah, they're somewhere. So let me double check. How's the audio? How is the audio? I should check my.
No, they're probably fine.
Should be okay.
There's
right?
100 people on here. They'll tell us. In
I know they'll
10
check us in
seconds.
10 seconds what the issue is. All right.
You guys excited to see the results or what?
Well, we could predict the results.
What did
Actually,
you think? How did you?
okay, I have to say, I'm very surprised. And before we get into the result, I was going to show you this image here. I thought this image kind of defined for me the surprise that I have, which is, okay, let me show this. Okay, this is why this image is very surprising to me. So what we have here represents HDR differences, right? And specifically, you have two types of decisions to be made, or one decision made. This spot right here. Some TVs are clipping it so it's mostly white, but it's very bright. Some TVs are slightly dimming it so you have more detail. Now, the question is, what is the reference monitor doing? The reference monitor is definitely clipping.
We're 5 minutes away from announcing.
All right.
results.
Oh, okay. 5 minutes away, guys. So we'll have our predictions in 1 minute. The BVM reference, because it clips at 1000, right? It cannot get above 1000 nits. This is very bright and very white on the reference, whereas on everything else, it's just colored on other TVs. So the Sony A95K, the Samsung S95B, and the QN90B by Samsung looks like this on the right. Tone map down, not as bright. The A95K and the G2 looks like this. And I was telling Classy, I'm getting more of an HDR effect. This is brighter. It's a little white, but it's brighter. My question to you is, which do you prefer? I think you guys are still out when they were showing
I've
this.
been here.
Did you see that?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Of course not. No.
Okay,
I'm just joking around. No, we took off for a little. We had to go see some sites. My editor's first time in New York, so I had to see some sites.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
But we're back. We're back. No, it's cool. I don't know. For me, like I typically always default to being a little brighter. Like for me, it's like
this one right here.
You get a little brighter. I'm like, I'm good with a little brighter, But again, I'm not judging this, and the color and accuracy and all that stuff isn't my forte. So I'd have to default to someone smarter than me.
Well, I spoke to the judges. Well, first I spoke to the calibrators, and because the reference monitor doesn't show this, it can't because it clips at 1000. First, you don't know what the creator's intent is because you don't have a monitor goes high enough. What does the creator want? Do they really want to clip this, or do they want to see this? But on a different level, though, the TVs cannot handle this at 4000 nits anyway. None of these TVs are able to show that brightness and the detail here at above 1000 nits.
Tone map and creation preferred and whatnot.
And on the Sony, which is ironic, the A95K does it differently than the X95K. Same setting.
Jumping on.
Hey, man.
Right now? Yeah, right there. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Come
on, man.
We're not in camera, that's why.
But
They can see.
You can see you. You're right here, man.
Corner.
Oh, wait here. Let me.
Brian, Mr. Status.
What's up?
He's my bodyguard.
Come on.
There we are. All right.
What's up, crew?
The gang is here. I'm gonna point this at you.
Oh, Leo's in the house. What's up, Leo?
Hey guys. Judging. We're gonna have results in less than 5 minutes.
There's
Robert
no
just told
QN
me.
here though. Leo Fire likes the
Oh
QN.
wait, I got a correction. I was interviewing LG, and he said to me, "No, don't call it QNED. QNED.
Oh.
So it's called
Are they
QNED."
gonna get
So I
sued if we
can't
say
try. So you
QNED?
can't read it.
You're
You
not
can't read
supposed
it. You gotta just sound it out.
QNED.
Well,
I don't
maybe
know if I can
because
say it.
someone else calls it QNED, they don't want to confuse it with a possible competitor that rhymes with handsome.
Yeah.
But so this, I was saying to the viewers, I thought was interesting was in the scene, the X95K, this is brighter and it clips just like the BVM reference, and on the G2 it looks just like this, whereas on the S95B, on the qd-oled A95K, and on the QN90B looks like here on the right, slightly dimmer, but you get all the gradients. I'm thinking, this is Mad Max. This scene, this is supposed to be bright. I'm supposed to be blinded by the sun that is behind that, right?
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to see this. I think this is closer to HDR intent. That means in this scene, X95K wins.
Oh, yeah, and unfortunately, it was one scene out of
It is
300.
one scene, right? So
Yeah.
talk about the 300 because you were saying you weren't very impressed with the X95K.
No, well, it's not the X95K or even the QN95B. It just became very evident that the OLEDs themselves, all three of them, were bright enough to look like LEDs
Mhm.
when they were all together and calibrated, obviously, guys,
Right.
that it made you feel like, where is there to win at this point
Yeah.
for them? You know,
Mhm.
where's the winning shot?
Where is the winning
So-
shot? And oh, thank you for the super chat, Sean. He wants to know
Why?
why
2-3 minutes away.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm just
2-3 minutes away. That's what Robert's telling us from the judging results tabulated. Hopefully, someone checks the math. Why were no sports compared? Hockey, soccer, cricket.
There were.
There were.
We did have hockey.
Was it for motion sports or what?
motion. I believe it was motion. I don't think it would.
Okay.
They had separate DSC tests, but there was hockey.
But that was for
Oh,
DSC.
yeah,
though.
that's true.
I don't know if it was for DSC. I think it was motion. I know last year we had a lot of baseball.
What did you feel when you saw the sports
I mean,
comparison?
the way they're calibrated and the way all motion is disabled, they all looked okay. Do you know what I mean? It just
Right.
it didn't. But I'm not sure. We have to do a better job with the content.
I think they should
You
have
know.
been looking at automatic brightness limiting in the motion. I mean, in the hockey. So hockey and soccer have a big problem. Football, the rest of the world, where it does not hold its brightness.
Yeah.
Not bright enough with OLED.
They seemed to do okay. It didn't seem like there was any ABL problems. Maybe because it was moving, it wasn't pressed, but the way they're calibrated, it's hard to give either one an advantage.
Yeah.
But it became evident for a lot of us, even with the print white lettering on the Oppo screen, or when they were bringing up the numbers, the OLEDs were white. There wasn't that grayish tone that OLEDs used to have.
Right.
So you have a G2, you have a A95K, and the S95B. They're so close to LEDs in terms of brightness. I just felt like for LEDs, though I love them, there's very little reason to buy them.
So I don't know if the results are out yet. Bush
Right
Green
now.
is saying A95K is the winner, and I know they're announcing it literally as we talk, right? But this goes to kind of like this comment where A95K has the deepest colors, but not worth the extra 1700. So I actually want to make this point. The A95K should have the deepest colors, but there were some scenes where it didn't. And I'm talking about the one where it was a dark scene. It was the, what was that?
What was this
Black
guy?
Panther. No.
Black Panther.
Black
Oh, the
Panther.
saturation screen.
Saturation.
Yeah, saturation.
It's dark. We're looking at shadow detail, but everyone ended up commenting, wait a minute, why is his hands so pale when on the reference there was a red,
Mhm.
clearly red tint on the hands. G2 had the red tint, and I'm going to talk about the G2, why I did that, as well as the Sony and the everything to the right of the monitor, red, to the left, QD-OLED, it was pale green, not enough red. And so what was explained to me, this is what Dwayne said, is basically the Sony did not have enough HDR color control for him to make that correction. That
Interesting.
is a calibration problem,
Yeah.
but he couldn't fix it.
Yeah.
So this is color and accuracy on the part of both the Sony and the Samsung, not just the Samsung. He goes, yeah, there's not enough red. There's nothing I can do.
Well, and I mean, I think that's the problem with having a panel come out so close to the shootouts. Samsung had several updates.
Yeah.
Sony, the engineers they were literally looking at it like they're still trying to do the math. Not making an excuse for it, but it's a fact that they
Yeah.
can't correct anything yet. But you come out late. That's what happens. We pushed the whole shoot out back for that
Yeah.
reason.
And additionally, too, let's address the G2. Wait, how did the G2 have so much more red? Well, we talked about this before the shootout. They need to perceptually match and give the white WOLED that extra red bump, and they did.
Mhm.
But what happened? Walls turned red. Cement was slightly redder, but the skin tones, more often than not, is actually more accurate. Now it
Yeah.
looks like the reference monitor, and now, do we need to do that for QD-OLED? Because clearly the QD-OLED is not receiving that red saturation when it should naturally. Doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
Red push isn't always a thing, guys. So
Well, and I mean, I think we had the 65-inch G1 last year had a really heavy pink on one side.
Mhm.
I feel like that was an issue, though they said the 65-inch has been a challenge from a uniformity standpoint.
Yep.
It seemed fine. So I didn't see that there was. Did you notice a lot of pink in any particular?
Yes.
You did on
Oh
one heavy
my
side.
God, on
Yeah, I
the
didn't see a
G2?
lot of
Okay,
it.
so on
Maybe
the
because I was
G-
watching a lot of the shots.
Specifically, it's in the white pattern. You know how you had the HDR
Mhm.
tone mapping, 4000 nit and 1000. That was when the left side of the G2 had pink. I immediately go, hey, everyone's, yes, that's the pink tint.
Yep.
It's unavoidable,
But
right?
it wasn't as bad as the G1 last
Oh no,
year.
the G1 was
The
green.
G1
It was
was, yeah,
green,
that
gray,
was on one
pink.
side only.
Yeah, this one's still one side, and only in that pattern. In normal content, I did not notice it,
Yep.
and which is fine. So Sean has a follow-up. Thanks, Sean, for the super chat. How can a darkroom do justice to QLED TVs and LCD? OLED is winning hands down. So Sean, you're mostly right, because the problem is reference monitor. When you compare it to a reference monitor, this reference monitor is used in a darkroom grade. The reference monitor is used in darkroom grade, right? So in a sense, you're right. This is the king of TVs in a dark room. Now, like we talked about this, king of TVs in North America in a dark room, because no Panasonic, no Philips. And to a certain degree, though, do we need a king of TVs in the kitchen? King of TVs outdoors?
So we talked about next year, what we will do is have professional lighting evenly. They'd open the windows, but that's only on one side. So we would open the window or have professional lighting in front of each TV.
Right.
That they would equally have very bright lights on them. But it didn't matter what the lighting conditions, even with the lights on in there, the OLEDs clearly were deeper and more three-dimensional.
Yeah, agreed. And it's because the contrast, the infinite contrast.
I think if we want to do it the right way, instead of having just that Mad Max shot, I would say put together a loop of specular highlights.
Yes.
Like a Pacific Rim, Mad Max moving. That would be the way I would see the impact. I feel like pausing the screen doesn't really give the
you don't get the extra impact.
And it's just, and then this has always been my issue with what we do here is I want to see LEDs run wild. So I rather see a pre-shootout image, pre-calibration image, see how they run wild.
Okay.
And then many of you may prefer that look to a calibrated down one. So it's not going to be what you see at home when you buy one of the QLEDs or one of the LEDs.
I definitely want to address this comment because the sentiments out there, which Rios Rogue is saying, the shootout is biased. As Robert Zone, Valley Electronics, they will crown A95K again as the king of TVs. So maybe he meant Sony's crowned again. So remember, if you've watched previous episodes of the shootout years before, Sony doesn't win every year. LG has won many years. So the bias is for dark room watching. OLED is going to win every year. So it's not to any one brand.
And I addressed this in an interview I did with Robert, and I wasn't aware. The shootout's 19 years old. Sony has won the last 3. This would be 4 years. Well, this would be 4 wins in 19 years.
Yes.
You guys have to remember, this was also Panasonic Plasma won many years. Samsung's Plasma won 2 years, the F4000, I think. So it may look that way, but I wouldn't go as far as saying things are biased. I would say, and Panasonic, for you guys out there, Panasonic was invited. So it may seem like it's Sony's winning constantly, but it's only been the last few years.
Right. And so this is another point. Is Samsung ruined the S95B. That's why they will lose to Sony A95K. They actually came closer than many people realize. I mean, when you have content so, like when you're pixel peeping, yes, the Sony comes out ahead here and there. They're very close.
They are, and I mean, I think, guys, I mean, the doubt you have with Samsung is, it's founded. It should be there because yes, everyone. I was getting messages up until this morning. Make sure you have the latest update. Make sure. There's no way to run a shootout. They are all updated to the very latest as of 2 days ago, meaning when they calibrated them. But if they're screwing themselves, there's nothing that the shootout can do about it. We can't. I mean, if we had done a Q90A in the beginning of the year, it would have gotten destroyed. By the end of the year, it may have won. That's not a way to really control it.
Yeah. And something that many of you don't realize is I expected the Q90B to be the brightest TV there. Turns out consistently the X95K was the brightest, and let me explain why. And this is very interesting for many of you who are thinking, I want the brightest TV I can get. Not necessarily the Q90B. What happened is Q90B is super bright, but it's super inaccurate on contrast. When you adjust the contrast to make it more accurate, meaning you're bringing back detail, because if you let it ride without adjusting contrast down, you're losing a lot of detail. You bring detail back, suddenly the X95K is significantly brighter than the QN90B. And the X95K easily is the brightest 4K TV you can get in 2022 in accurate contrast. We're not even talking color accuracy, just contrast luminance accuracy. And that's something I didn't expect. I thought the QN90B would be a lot brighter than it was. And it isn't, because it really compromised contrast to hit those brightness numbers. So the X95K was very bright.
Well, and if you're talking about that peak brightness, if it does ruin the contrast ratio, then it just looks flat. That's the challenge. And that's where we want to gas it. That's why tomorrow's shootout's going to be very interesting, because you have the Z9K brute force QN, the 900B, and the Z2. But the Z9K is very formidable, much more than the X95.
And the QN90B is very formidable in brightness after your contrast adjustment. So
tomorrow it'll be interesting to see if versus last year's group, if this group brute force can do more. I hope they can, because today, honestly, with you guys know I love LEDs. Other than bright room performance, there just didn't seem a reason. Again, if I brought you guys into the room with us, you can tell me if you think this, you bring them in the room with you. Even it would be hard pressed to tell me what an LED was by eye.
Yeah.
Initially.
Oh, hey, come on, because we're just talking about this.
Because when you walked in years ago, if you saw an OLED, it was immediate that it was an OLED.
Do you have the results for us?
No.
Oh.
But if you saw a plasma years ago, it was obvious it was a plasma.
Right.
The OLEDs look bright enough to where if you said they were all LEDs, you would buy it. You'd say, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then within a few minutes, you'd realize, my point is, what is the advantage for LEDs to purchase one other than bright room?
Other than bright room. That's absolutely
where
correct.
Before, I would always defend LEDs because I wanted bright explosions. I wanted that impact. The OLEDs have that impact now. The G2 and the qd-oleds have that impact. So it's my point is we're having a hard time finding reasons to recommend them. And
let me hit this super chat real quick, because I have a question for you, Classy. Thank you for joining us. Sean has a comment. He returned his QN900B 85-inch DSE. So we know it's had issues. Looking forward to the 8K shootout, especially QN900B versus Z9K. They're both super bright. I'll tell you right now, when they were calibrating it, they both broke 2,000 nits. So the QN900B and the Z9K going to be a great head-to-head brightness HDR effect. And Brian and your separate FOMO, Brian, and Whisper and Classy do it their own separate, then they're especially HDR and sports. Yeah, they will. We'll see. The content's already been done, so we'll see what happens tomorrow. So we're going to follow up. But give us some of your general observations. So, oh, hey. Oh, wait. So
surprise.
They're counting up. We're not going to break anything, but what have your observations doing so far? Is this what you expected after calibration? Surprises?
My expectation, basically, when done right, it is very difficult to choose which one is the best. You're literally, splitting hairs outside of, the technology deficiencies or pros. But calibration-wise, I've been dealing with the shootout for, I don't even want to say how many years or whatever. I know I took a hiatus from it, but this is, for me, the most challenging comparison ever.
Why is that?
Simply because the manufacturers have stepped up the game as far as allowing myself to really tune the displays. I'm not speaking of any out of the box or anything like that, but from what I can do from my perspective, it is so close post calibration. It's really, it's really a use case and also, a defect type of thing. It's not something like, I can calibrate the grayscale better on this one. They're all great on grayscale calibration.
I saw that.
It's not a point about whether or not I can do a 4,000 plus pattern set of like 3D for the LG, or just do the CMS on the Sony and the LG. Just as far as the period and something, it's not like that.
Okay, so this is the hard part. It's so close, but it always comes down to dollar and cents. Your money, and meaning your budget is reasonable. You can afford any of these TVs. Which would you bring home?
Well, I did disqualify myself as a judge.
Yes, so you could say
to be
that,
fair,
right?
because I calibrated basically all of the OLEDs,
Okay.
the Samsung, the Sony, and the LG. Plus, I also did the BVM monitor.
All right.
But for me, at this point, If I'm looking at a 65 or 55 inch model, and I had to choose between all of them, and with my pocket,
All right.
I would do the Sony.
The
Simply
A95K.
A95K, simply because the uniformity from
Oh, yeah, the
0.5% stimuli, which we did not show, by the
Mhm.
way, up to 100% stimuli is pretty much tint free. And also on the low end, it has the least amount of defects, uniforming with blotching or,
You're ready.
banding and things like that.
Results?
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Banding
Please
and
come
things
in.
like that. We're coming. Or banding like that. So for me, it's more so I would go that route. That's not to say that I would not choose the G2
Right.
as a very, 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 very
Very
close
good.
runner-up.
Yeah.
But with the G2, its pluses that I have on him, and from my actual wallet is I can get it when the 97 come out. I can get a 97 inch G2 WRGB based OLED, where I can't do that at this point in time with a QD-OLED. So for me, in my pocket right now, the G2 97 inch is good enough,
Yes.
even with its uniformity opportunities that need to be improved,
Right.
to trump a 65 inch maxed out QD OLED from Sony at this point.
And
So-
then, yeah, that's a good point. How about you, Classy?
I think the 77 G2s are just so clean that
Yeah.
especially being the same price basically as a 65 A95K, that's the no-brainer between the two.
Yeah.
I mean, the 77 makes up more of that difference. And when it comes to the LCDs, the only reason I can recommend one is if it's a super bright room, and in that case, get the X95K.
Right.
Because
Yeah, the X95K
just wipe the
brightness.
Samsung away at this point.
Which is very
it was dead last in my opinion, and that really wasn't that close.
Yeah.
And then for the S95B, it had too many issues that I don't even really think were anything that was really judged on, but like the fact the way the color gamut doesn't auto select, and then you end up without
Yes.
getting that benefit of the BT 2020 coverage, the weirdness that it does with like the green tinting when it gets really bright in HDR,
Right.
the things like that, and the way that it tone maps and stuff.
We'll
I would
talk about
definitely
that.
take a G2 over that.
Okay, well, I'll let you guys go. Enjoy the result and see if it matches your expectations. Thanks, guys. All right, so results are being announced as we speak. You probably already know what it is. There are a couple of things mentioned that I want to hit for you guys so that you guys understand. So one of them is near black. We call it near black stimulus. So clearly the A95K, not the S95B now, the Sony A95K was specifically designed to hit the near black stimulus closer to the reference monitor than any TV there. And that includes even the LCD TV X95K. I was very impressed. The G2 jumped from black to way above near black. There was nothing here. So clearly the G2 has adjusted, and they're jumping from black to right. There's none of that near black gradient that the A95K has. S95B jumped it just as high, if not a little bit more. And the QN90B just can't even do it at all. So that's something that Sony does very cool. And to talk about this green tint on the S95B, so this is what Samsung did to get brighter. They pushed the green a little bit harder. And so there, during all the HDR pattern tests, the S95B always looks brighter, but always looks slightly greener. Why? It's allowing the green above a certain nit level. The Samsung is going to have a little bit more green. And that's how it does it. Sony, accurate at all brightness levels, but that's why it doesn't get as bright as the Samsung. And so oftentimes you're going to see these stimulus patterns. Oh, look, the Samsung has a brighter window, or the window is brighter. It's because the green, there's more green in the white windows. It's less accurate. So let's get some super chats here real quick. Thanks for coming by, joining us in our wrap up. Hey, Sean, QN90B versus E9K for HDR sports. Yes, we're going to see what they do. I do not know what the content is because they're still changing the content on the fly. But definitely HDR on sports, it should be amazing because motion is rock solid. You're not going to have any type of ABL. And HDR in a bright room, it's going to be exciting to see how they do Mad Max for sure. Thank you for that. And here we have, thank you, Adidas NYR for the super chat. Why wasn't this a blind test? Okay, so having a blind test, really, I don't think, it's almost, you're taking away bias, but I don't believe there is a bias here. But hey, you know what? I could be wrong. You only have 3 brands, and it's so obvious what the differences are. Whereas in audio, sometimes your imagination plays tricks on you. When you have the actual visual, we are pointing out specific things in visual scenes that we can distinguish. I don't believe a blind test would have changed the results. Maybe if it was like a 5 second determination, okay, in 5 seconds, decide which TV looks good. Blind test might allow you just allow your gut to answer. But here, everyone got like 15 minutes per pattern to study each TV against a reference TV. So I don't know how useful a blind test is, but reasonable minds can disagree. Let me know why you think a blind test would be better. And so the results are being announced. Let's see. Okay. A lot of people feel that it is a bias. I know there's a bias for OLED because it's a dark room, but I don't know if there is a branding bias. You'll be surprised how many of the judges have LG TVs at home as their TV. C9, C10, C1, and we're talking people like Jason Dustel. These judges, they have LG TVs, so it's maybe biased against Samsung, but then we have he is a grading suite designer. He puts together, calibrates grading suites. You know what he uses for his broadcasting grading suite? Samsung TVs. So you have a lot of judges here who, in their own professional and personal use, they use Samsung, LG, and Sony. But Sony is not the predominant brand. So oftentimes when we talk bias, it's because what you have at home, you want what you have at home to win. Not the case often, not the case. Women beach volleyball as opposed to men beach volleyball for sports testing. I will take that under consideration. That is funny. And ABL exists on non-OLED panels as well. Yes, Asaf, it does exist. It happens to me all the time on the QN90A or the Q90R when I'm testing it in the past. It's because it's energy, very energy intensive. They will pull it down. They'll put up briefly, overheating, energy consumption. ABL helps with all of that. It will not hold brightness for a length of time before it starts to dim. Now, OLED's just more aggressive, but it happens on non-OLED TVs at a certain brightness level. OLEDs, it's a lower brightness level when it happens, and non-OLEDs, much higher. So, let's see. A95 Z9K HDR impact. In a dark room with medium dark well, okay, the Z9K is going to give you HDR impact because they will just wazoo you with brightness. But I don't know how much of that impact improvement compared to A95K, which will have perfect blacks. We'll see tomorrow because I need to reset my expectations every year. So we'll see. I know the results have been announced. Do you agree with the results? Let me know what the results is. A95K swapped everything. Is this the results? This is a promotion. All right, let's talk about this. This could be a Sony promotional event. Well, only because Sony won, right? But in the past, it was an LG promotional event. And I have to say, Sony needs to be congratulated for what they did. Sony spent a lot of time getting their processing right for the A95K. And as we saw, it's not easy. You have to choose your poison. Like even right here in the scene that I have, right? In this scene, Sony went with this look right here. G2 went with this one, and I would have given the G2 the win for going with this. Whereas Sony going with this, the impact was lost. So now I have all this detail. This is Mad Max. I don't need to see dust. I need to see the sun's brightness behind this car, right? And so obviously this is creator's intent as well, but the HDR impact, how important is it? So it's something that you guys could actually change to taste because Sony is in gradation preferred. If they went to brightness preferred, possibly this would have been brighter, possibly, not definitely. And Juan, you're not going to get 1,000 nits from an OLED either. So when you say 1,000 nits, getting 1,000 nits at above 10% window is very hard on OLED. And that's the key. Right now, an OLED at full screen. Hey, man,
What's up?
who won?
Did you hear?
They're telling me they're telling me that the A95K pretty much beat everything across the board.
Yeah, it won at 8. Average score is 8.9. The Samsung, I'm sorry, 9.9. Let me get it out now.
We have the official
I have the official
results
scores.
on paper.
So the A95K won, and the
Obviously.
Samsung got second, and the G2 got third. And what I really think is because the G2 screen uniformity wasn't even close to as good as
Yes, the
the
pink.
QD-OLED. So in the daytime scoring and the daytime viewing, they had that part of it. The dirty screen effect was part of the daytime viewing, and there was the only time that there was a significant difference between the two QDs and the G2 was with regards to that. And I think the majority of it was the screen uniformity.
And that is important
Yeah.
for sure, because relatively speaking, this G2 actually is pretty good. I mean, it could be worse.
Oh, yeah. So it was an 8.9 to an 8.3 to a 7.9. So about 0.6 of a point for the QD from the A95K down to the Samsung, and then another 0.4. So a full point for the A95K over the G2, which is a big number. Last year was very close.
Very close.
This was like tenths of a point. This year it's a full point.
Wow.
So yeah, that's
so this QD-OLED has really changed. I mean, it's reset the judging scale for sure.
So I think that's a pretty significant difference. I think that, LG is probably going to be pretty disappointed with regards to how much that uniformity causes it. But, that's something to take into consideration. If there's an issue with the screen uniformity, maybe that's something they can look at, try to improve.
Now, a lot of people are saying this should have been a blind test.
Yeah.
Do you think it would have made a difference for you?
Well, I tell you, I know D-Nice, he did the calibrations, took himself out of it. They redacted his results in order to keep it more fair, because he had his hands on the TVs and knew
that's
all the
total bias,
intricacies.
right?
And so that's good. I mean, either he did or they did. And then, so I mean, I don't know. You can't really do it because everybody knows what the TVs look like. So as soon as they go to a blank screen and come back, when there's no signal, we know exactly which ones are which. And the two, the LCD TVs both are so evident because
so
they're so
obvious.
much brighter. And when they turn it to a white screen, it's so obvious which ones are the LCD. So you know which two those are. You know what the menus look like for all the TVs. So you'd have to turn your eyes, come back with only content on. It's just difficult with this. There's 50 people in there.
That's another issue for practical reasons as well. That makes sense.
And I don't think any of the judges care which one wins.
I told them the judges have different TVs at home. They do not all have Sonys. They have LGs.
And they're all in the industry, and they all look at a Sony BVM monitor when they do their work. So they want a reference set. And some of the people said we want things to look closer to what kind of TVs we have on set, like professional TVs.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get these TVs to reference or look like what they need them to look like. So I don't think it really matters.
Yeah. Now, do you agree with the result?
I mean, I don't know. I guess we know we've had some issues with that Samsung with regards to its glitchiness and whatnot. Glitchy software or some of the firmware breaks, they don't really factor in this kind of setting, right? Because we dive into more than the picture quality.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That
so
is
is this
true.
a picture quality thing? I think the only thing that looked as good as the S95B and therefore the A95K was that G2 looked amazing that you had. I mean, it looked right. We were looking through that. And so I'd be happy with either of those three TVs. But the uniformity is a big difference for me. The QD-OLEDs look good.
The pink tint on having all the TVs lined up same size, the pink tint for me is a deal breaker because I know that it's there and it's so close. I might as well just pay a couple hundred more and get the A95K just to avoid that risk, right? And that's something that LG Display knows. They need to figure it out. And the team is here. The LG Display engineering team is here. So I'll talk to them about that. I'll ask them because they've always asked me about the pink tint.
And the other thing is that, no matter what we do with regards to the QD-OLEDs, they currently don't have anything bigger than 65.
No, they do not.
They were asking me at LG, it's well, how do you recommend? I'm the size difference right there, but so there's a lot of different variables. So you're going to have complaints no matter what. But I mean, I think it was the screen uniformity that really made the difference because in the daytime viewing, that was a big difference. And the G2 was pretty far down because I think it was probably because of that. They did some of that hockey test and the dirty screen. So that was during the daytime viewing, and that was a solid 2-point difference. And then you can't come back to that if everything else is that close. You know?
Did you feel that the G2's uniformity is what killed it as well?
I mean, they talked about that size as a challenge. So they said by default, the 77s are cleaner, the 83s are cleaner.
That's a surprise.
Usually it's the 55 that's
right.
But, but that's the size they chose.
Here's a good point from Sean. Thanks for the super chat, Sean. He's saying, why in Samsung TVs the blur and shutter have to be put off in off mode to make fast moving objects look clear. Is that their perfect setting? So I find on is our better setting. So
Well, I mean,
now
that's-
for testing, it's off, right? They're all off on testing. So you're not testing. So I have a problem with motion testing because you have to test for the content. If you're testing for movie content and it's filmmaker mode, you're supposed to turn everything off to see what they do with the least processing. So you don't have soap opera, but then you have micro stutter. But for sports and stuff, you need to put it on. Anti-blur, anti-jitter needs to be on a lot higher for fast-moving objects to look clear. So I would have it like 6, 7 on a Samsung for sure, and then blur is like a 9 or 10. So for the purpose of this, though, you don't have it. You're going to have it off. So definitely, it's
Which is why you want to have judges that are used to seeing the content, like as you know what I mean. Because
Yeah.
those guys in there
No.
have seen films and they know what's up. Like they have a better eye than me.
Yeah.
So like I could never be a judge in there.
But when you get, it'd be interesting to have the opposite. It'd be interesting to have regular people that
Yeah.
like regular content
right.
and leaving some of the processing enabled,
Well-
because I think some of that processing helps some of the QLEDs.
No question.
You know, where you're
Mhm.
stripping them down to look like OLEDs, which is what we've talked about before.
Yep.
Is you're making them look as much like I'd rather see them. We've talked about this out of the box when you unbox too. Let
Yeah.
that run wild in comparison.
Yeah, and also like a lot of the
Can't forget
processing,
that, baby.
which is, these TVs are really good computers. Like they have processing power. So like there is something to like having a little bit of the motion smooth. Like, it's that's what the TV's for.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Or,
a lot of people are used to seeing movies with like watching like 48 frames per second like movies like The Hobbit and things like that, where you're like, okay,
Well,
Well,
Gemini Man.
yeah,
That clip
that's-
right there.
yeah, I mean that's tough. So you got to like, it just depends on how you like it, and therefore it's good to get a lot of opinions. But that's their opinion.
But getting it to its purest form, you can't then add back some of that processing that would help. So, I mean, we should have an unboxing shootout,
Mm-hmm.
how they look out of the box.
I'm down.
That's what it should be. Just see how,
Unboxing
Jen and I will lift them
well,
up.
just to see how they look.
You guys are so good at that now.
And then see how they look when they're calibrated. Because people scream for calibration, but then when it doesn't work out, they're like, well, if I use this, it might win.
Yeah.
They can't have both. You
Can't
can't,
have
have
both,
it to its
right.
purest form.
I
And then
can't-
say you wish you could use dynamic contrast
Well,
or live color or motion settings.
Oh, and Sean, thanks for the super chat. I feel the 8K shootout will be better. It is at 85 inches, not 65. So, Sean, right there,
It's 85 and
Three-
88.
two 85-inch TVs, one 88-inch
The
TV,
thing is,
so
like,
all over 88K shootout.
I feel like in an 8K, I can tell you who the winner is going to be. In
Oh,
that. So,
Wait, predict.
I don't want to predict it. Come on.
I already did it.
Well, here the
I
thing is
my
that
first
one of
one.
the TVs is $30,000. The other two are $10,000. So listen,
Actually, that's not
I-
true.
well,
The Samsung's only like 6.
okay. So
Okay.
that's
Even worse.
the
That's
LG's
what I mean.
the LG Z2 is the best TV on the planet. I mean, it's
Have
amazing.
you seen it on?
So yeah, so
Oh,
we
I
did
should-
unboxing this. So
Oh,
we were
nice.
just like,
we were
what?
watching some footage last night, and my prediction was A95K. 4K. We predicted this, and then the Z2 would win the 8K shootout, and then I thought the A95K would beat and win. I've changed that to I think the Z2 will actually win the overall.
Depends on how they score the uniformity, because the Z2 is not perfect either with the
It's
screen.
got the
uniformity.
OLED uniformity.
It's got a little. I mean, it's got a little bit, but I mean, I know though. You go to the qd-oleds and they look like it's like
Yeah,
white.
they're very clean.
It's perfect. So we'll have to see. But I mean, I think. Listen, if I had the money, I get the Z2 in a heartbeat. Come on, man.
Exactly. Even
Or
with
I
the
get the-
discount, that's still
Yeah.
expensive.
Oh, yeah.
Or the G297 too. But that, 88-inch, that's pretty bomb. Pretty
Oh.
awesome.
77-inch QD-OLED. I spoke to the Samsung people. Of course,
Oh.
they cannot reveal anything secret. But he kept on smiling, really
Oh,
large like
yeah.
this. I mean,
I'll say
now he doesn't speak English
it's
very well.
It's lights out if that happens. I mean, when it happens.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
77, 83-inch, 85-inch. If they made an
Oh,
85, it's over.
yeah.
I like LG. I mean, but like, LG display, they put a lot of money into those plants, man. And the QD
Yeah.
comes out, there's going to be some fighting going on
Well,
here.
that's another thing is to the LG.
You want to jump in and say hi, or
I want to take the cup off your hand.
Oh my gosh, you're so sweet.
Sipping that ice.
Thank you. There's people taking care of us. They're awesome. I think it's just boredom, right? Though you're just bored.
So the LG
You're just bored. at this
LG team from Korea is here, and so of course I attacked him with the hard-hitting question. Hey, this year MLA is coming out. Your made a lens array. Big grin on his face.
Yep.
Big grin. His response.
yeah,
I subscribe to your channel.
yeah, exactly.
Like, wait, that's not a yes or a no.
Well, if they did the lens on 4K, that
8K.
would If they did it,
Well,
on,
if they did it on
if they did it on
4K, yes.
4K,
If they
that
did.
would be like an immediate rescue.
Yep.
But
It would raise color volume, it would raise brightness, but it doesn't fix the pink tint.
no. But the
That's
fact is,
something they need
if
to
they
fix.
if they did it in 4K, you'd have a lot of really mad 4K purchasers.
Yeah.
At least 8K being so high end,
Right.
it lets people say, okay, maybe if I make a purchase, I know in a couple of years this will be here.
Mhm.
If that was coming out for 8K this year or 4K next year, you'd be pretty upset if you bought a G2 or whatever.
And then we'll have the 97-inch coming out, hopefully in Q4.
Yeah, the 97-inch is something I would definitely look at, but the price is off the charts. I mean, it's priced out.
But if you're in the market for a 100-inch projector and you're at above 20,000 anyway,
Yep.
you add a screen and then you add a tone mapping system, you're at 40,000. Easy.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say with these larger, the 100-inch X92, the 98-inch QN90A, and even the Z2, they're so expensive that the screen uniformity is much better. The QCing is much better.
This is a great comment from Sean. Thanks for the super chat, buddy. Why does scenes have to be put in pause to judge? As we saw today, who sees a TV like that? Like, pause.
Well, you guys got to remember, you're talking about critical viewing.
Right.
So
Why?
these guys, here's what they, even though when you see the pictures were like this, each judge needs to be at the direct viewing angle.
Mhm.
Impossible to do that in live motion. What they should do is run the scene first with everybody kind of together
Mhm.
and then pause it.
And
I
then
do
pause
understand
it.
what you're saying.
Right. Do a little bit of both. I
Yeah,
agree.
do a bit of both. At least give the impact from it. But the problem is, you really do have to be. If a 65-inch TV is, it has to be the width of your shoulders. You cannot deviate, especially with the LEDs that get annihilated.
Yeah.
So
And the BVM. The BVM has to be.
It has
on
to be,
axis.
yeah.
The minute you get off axis, even the
Absolutely.
BVM reference.
but I
is
get what
off.
you're saying about. You're right. The impact is better
Insight?
in motion.
Yeah, I mean, there's on their people are on their soapboxes and they're
Where?
just arguing about,
Oh, the soapbox is the actual judges?
No, like the judges are talking about
Why
know,
is this way? And why?
no,
are you-
like Dwayne D Nice is talking about how Samsung is really hard to calibrate because they're inconsistent, and I'm like, oh, you
Yeah.
got people in there, man. They're not gonna like this
Yeah,
stuff.
First of all,
I mean, it's
everyone,
okay.
even in live streams, you must read the room.
I'm like,
Drama.
you know what? You got the three big brands in there. I'm not. It makes me uncomfortable to be in there when someone's trying to talk.
So-
But it's good. It's good to get the feedback.
Yeah.
But
so Brandon goes, by the way, I do have a 98-inch TCL, baby.
yeah.
and,
And,
and I like
listen,
it.
I'm talking to the LG people. I'm saying, listen, you get that 97-inch in my house, man. It's gonna sell. You're gonna sell some units.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I think you listen. Samsung got second place. They came out of nowhere. That's a Samsung's first OLED.
S95B?
It got second
Yeah.
place the first year it's
despite-
out. That's the
yes.
first year, and the LG G2 is in its third year,
Yep.
and before that, no, this is third year, and before that they made OLEDs for years,
And they've been winning in those
and
years.
and,
too.
and it's still a
Yeah.
great TV. But that listen, the pink tint and the uniformity, hey, fix the issues.
Yes.
You got to fix the issues because last year we had one. It was the whole side of it was pink.
I just mentioned
and
yeah.
that would have beat the A90K or J if it had been
Maybe.
probably uniform. It might have beat
Mhm.
it. It was so close.
Thank you for the super chat, man. Kite. Hopefully, the haters on YouTube can agree that Sony has the best TV this year as they've taken a quantum leap with quantum dots in performance.
leap.
And yes, both S9, not just Sony,
That's
like
funny.
you just said, Samsung and Sony, because of the new technology, they won. And Sony, because of the processing and the new technology. But this is a game changer for everyone selling TVs. And it's
Well, I mean, and too, we said that without having a chance to update the Sony could have hurt them in one way, but at the same time, I think they appreciated the extra 3 or 4 months to refine.
yeah,
If you really think about it, it was planning on coming out first. So Samsung did fly out there, and then they've had the 1500 nits, and they've changed. But then again, Samsung became more accurate, which may have helped it today. Maybe it wouldn't have helped if it came out in its purest form that we
Yeah.
all like. So
well, so that's the funny thing is even with Dwayne D Nice complaining that I can't get it accurate, it still got second place.
Yeah.
I mean, let's say it was accurate. I don't think it would have had much of a hope beating the Sony anyway, even without the special accuracy settings that you can get with the LG, right, 3D LUT, or with Sony's more multi-point, where you could change a lot more. Samsung base QD-OLED, and we're talking this is like the raw QD-OLED as it is, did very well. That's
well,
QD-OLED
in the
at its
QD-OLED,
raw.
as they were calibrating it, the automatic cal was an auto cal.
Mhm.
The Q900B couldn't do it. It kept getting
No.
stuck. But the
Q90B.
QD-OLED could. So that speaks more about what Samsung's doing in that regard, meaning it was able to be done. You know what I mean? So they're getting there.
Here's a great comment from Leo75. Thank you for the super chat. Hey, FOMO Brian, I missed the shootout. How did the LG motion and upscaling compare to the Sony? I don't think we really challenged it enough. I thought the scenes were not hard enough.
They weren't hard enough, but we spent so much of the shootout talking about SDR.
Yeah, I noticed
and
that. It was like an entire
1080p.
hour.
About 3 hours later, we end up with HDR, and I'm like, okay, so it was interlaced 1080i, and we do have to work on the shots that we're showing.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to update those, I would say.
And those were updated. That's the thing. We need to update it again.
Oh yeah, we
Spears
gotta
and
update them
Muscle
again.
2. That was the Spears and Muscle 2 second disc.
No, it
or-
wasn't even that. It was just random
random
footage.
stuff.
Just random footage, all new. Like we were here last year, completely different footage, but it wasn't. I don't think it challenged the TVs enough. I'm glad it was different.
But I do
the
think
motion
I
needs
don't
help.
think the G2 did great with the SDR scaling. I
No.
don't think it did,
Not as well.
but you know,
You can sort of
And
hear that they're still talking. Caleb's still on the mic right there. That's why I'm looking. I gotta go
he's
here
getting
with
yelled
this.
down.
Yeah, we're taking turns going back in there and checking it out.
Calming people
You'll
down.
be out here for
Hey,
us?
break up, man.
No, I
break
might
up.
go back in there too, but he'll be here. He'll be fine. It's fine.
All right. A quick pricing, Scott. Q90B is around 2100, 2200, just above 2000. S95B is getting close to that. It's at 2400 currently, both 65 inches. And 2400 is with a $200, some kind of gift card, $2,600 base. And I think Samsung is subsidizing those gift cards because it's no coincidence. Across the board, you're seeing this $200 gift card thing, whether it's Crutchfield or Amazon or Best Buy or on Samsung's own site. Heatsink sizes. So all the A95Ks, 55, 65 have heat sinks. G2 all have heat sinks. And S95B, it doesn't have a heat sink per se, but some are observing that if you pull it apart, there's some kind of a thermal heat sink there. So is it a heat sink? Arguably, maybe the S95B has a heat sink, but they're not marketing it. But then, to be fair, they're not marketing anything. Oh, you're clapping.
I don't know. It's probably just to thank the sponsor.
All right. And it looks like they're closing out. Someone's saying S95B1. Nobody's paying $4,000 for a 65-inch TV. Preston, the score is so close, you're not wrong. Honestly, the S95B did very well. Given uniformity and what it's able to do with color and brightness, it's pretty good. it's still an amazing TV for sure. 2400, yeah, for me, that's a no-brainer. All right, let's get over here. Thanks everyone for showing up. This is our wrap-up show. Let us know what you thought of the shootout, how you do it better, how you do it differently, because every year we're looking to improve the shootout. I know lots of people saying, I should have been a blind test. So it's something to discuss for sure. Yeah, in Europe, apparently the S95B is 2,300. Yeah, that's a great price, I think, for sure. And thank you for the super chat, Ethan Chan. C1 83-inch now is 3,700. Is it worth it or wait? Obviously, things get cheaper all the time, but 3,700 is the cheapest I've seen this 83-inch TV. And now at that size, you have other competitors, but even the Sony X95K right now, more expensive than that. And I think the 83-inch, if you don't need that extra brightness, this is such a good-looking TV. I think 3,700 is worth it. If you wait, you could always get cheaper. So that's something only you could answer, Ethan. But it is an amazing TV, though. Did you break up any fights, Brian? Hey, sit down, man. Sit down. Relax.
it's when we come in.
You don't have to stand. Ah, there we go. I'm going to angle this the right way. Right. Just
You guys
catching up.
enjoy the show? You guys are watching?
What would you guys do differently? What would you want next year, right? Show is officially over. It was a sweep by the A95K. What surprised me is not the A95K sweep, but how the G2 has fallen. The separation between first and second was somewhat close, but then
Yeah,
second and third, it's like
It was closer to the G2, again, in this comparison, was closer to the LEDs than it was to the OLEDs.
Yep.
So we had the OLEDs grouped very tightly last year, and then the LEDs were farther behind. This year we had the G2 felt like it was it was compared to it was stuck with the LED price, so it was I think it went 7.5, 7.6, 7.6, 7.7, 7.9 is the way they went score wise.
right.
And that
Now, are we still doing the gaming on Monday? So just that you know,
I don't think
EHJ.
so. I don't think Robert's gonna be able to swing it.
So gaming, we just didn't have time. We were
Yeah.
hoping to make it a separate day. It's just so much comes together for gaming.
Well,
so much.
logistically-
Logistically, you need separate
Yeah.
devices.
But
The
even us
splitters will not
assembling
work
the
well.
TVs, we boxed them, reboxed them, we hung them. It's what, 5 or 6 hours, which we'll have to repeat tomorrow night.
Right.
And then bringing them back to the location, that means it would be another 5 or 6 hours to unbox and then network it. We would have to do it in a separate
Yeah.
day.
And I was going to mention there was one more thing I want to talk about, which is at the end of the day, the biggest surprise for me was not the A95K win or the G2 loss even. It's that the X95K is so bright. I always thought that this year the QN90B would be the brightness king. And here's the thing. You're going to look at ratings, to be fair. Ratings will show this super bright measure. But here's the thing. Ratings does not calibrate for contrast in HDR mode. So in your HDR mode, that brightness is like a green push brightness on a white window. If you go in there and just adjust contrast a bit to bring detail back, not even detail as good as the Sony, suddenly it's less bright than the X95K. So the X95K is definitely the brightest TV you can get, even with the QN90B. And so you have to take ratings measurement with a grain of salt. They did not go in there and adjust contrast down. If you plan to get some detail back into contrast, the brightness is gone, guys.
So you feel that if the QN90B, if we were doing an out-of-box comparison, it may have fared, the 95 would have fared better?
S95B or the
You're talking the QN90B or the
Yeah,
X95 versus the QN95?
The QN95B, the QN95B and 90B, this applies to both. Yes, if there was no calibration, but what you're still going to notice is, hey, in this image, what happened to all the detail? And then someone's going to say, oh, the contrast is too high.
Yeah.
They're going to go in, pull the contrast down. Okay, the detail's back, but suddenly, why is it so dim? So the Sony out of the box, hey, we're talking about the contrast on the Samsung being pumped up in order to hit the brightness. But if you bring some of that detail back, you're going to lose that brightness on the Samsung. So the Sony X95K ends up being the brightness winner among all TVs this year. Don't you think?
The which?
The X95K, just
Oh,
brightness
yeah.
just
X95K. Yeah.
brightness with some accuracy, right? That's pretty impressive. So Sony's going to be given something for that. And I normally would have given that award to Samsung, but this year, I didn't see that last year. Actually, it's more aggressive this year than last year.
Not only that, but also the way that the QN95B was tone mapping
Bouncing?
was pulling it down even more, on top of having the clipping fixed. So,
Yeah. So results, your impressions, no surprise, or anything in the shootout that surprised you, or you'd like to change next year?
I think there was too much weight into the SDR day mode.
Yeah, that took a lot. That's what they were saying.
Because
That was a lot
that's
of
where the
time.
difference was, and for a critical watching display, that shouldn't day mode shouldn't have that much weight.
Who won the day mode? A95K?
A95K, then S95, then G2. If you were to remove the SDR day mode, then it would have been A95K, G2, really close, and then S95B.
But the G2. So what could the G2 not do well in day mode?
I don't know. We don't have the subcategories.
I would have thought the G2 would do very well in day mode because the heatsink pushes it harder than the A95K.
Yeah,
right?
I want to see the subcategories.
You want to recount? Is that what you're doing? SDR day mode recount. Oh wait, someone's gonna get rid of this. Sorry guys, I'm slow on the sexy chat.
Because to me, it's like then if you were to add in gaming, well, then the G2 comes back in higher with the gaming.
I think these bots, the minute you hit 400 viewers, the bots attack. Which reminds me, don't forget to click like, my friends, and ask your questions you want. We're not going to be here too long. We're just going to hang out, talk to some of the calibrators and judges, get their impressions, break up some fights between brand favorites. So maybe that solves the whole blind test. Blind testing. What are your thoughts on making it a blind test where you don't know what TVs you're looking at, assuming it's possible? I mean, does that make a difference?
I don't see how it's feasible because as the content loops or you pause it or something like that, how many times does it trigger a handshake and then you end up seeing the no signal image or whatever, and that immediately gives it away. And plus, with the QD OLEDs,
Yeah.
it's really easy to
It's really
see
obvious.
the color fringing with that magenta on top, the
That's a
cyan on the
good
bottom.
point.
Like, there's so many signs that would give it away.
How about separating
It's just- there's no point.
the two QD OLEDs though? Don't know if it's a Sony or the S95B. Could you still tell?
I mean, I could. I think most of us could that knows what to look for. I mean,
Right.
as soon as you see something's clipped, you know it's a Samsung.
Yeah. And thank you for the super chat, Spillage Village. Was the X95A able to keep up in control?
see,
No,
that's-
the
that's
blooming
what it
was
gives up.
not in control. And forget the blooming. It was the contrast was not there. Was there any noticeable dimming between the models? Yes. Felt the G2 would be higher given EOTF. So a lot of good questions. So X95K had the most obvious lifted blacks. I didn't see blooming per se. It was more like lifted blacks, right?
It depended on what
Depends
you're
on the
looking
scene.
at.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
at the
Ferris
test
wheel,
patterns and
yeah.
stuff, it showed more.
Oh yeah. And then you had noticeable dimming between the models. That's a good question. Did you notice any aggressive dimming between the various OLEDs?
Not in the majority of what was there. There was one time where Dwayne said, pull up the menu to refresh it. But that was in a bright HDR thing. So other than
Okay.
that, not really.
Yeah. So yeah, hopefully we answered some of your questions, Village Village. But okay, so to be fair to X95K as well, the QN90B was incredibly aggressive with its anti-blooming, and you could see it crushing a lot of shadow detail in the patterns. Now in real content, there was a little bit of crushing, but it's not as noticeable as in pattern content. So it's always that give and take with a non-OLED is crush some of that shadow detail, but you have no blooming, or have some blooming, but with a Sony, the focus is bring that shadow detail back. Now, the one question you always ask, all the viewers ask, same price, A95K, 65-inch, 77-inch G2.
G2.
G2, 77-inch.
77 C2 even.
Yeah. That extra inches of 12 inches is pretty significant. Now, if it's 77, 83, it's kind of close, but 65, 77 is a good jump. I would take the A95K because I see some of the pink tint and it bothers me a little bit. My wife would not see it. So if it was for my family, G2 77. If it was for me in my room where I can have either, I'd take the A95K.
The 77s, I have not heard of or seen a 77 with
The pink tint.
that tint.
So
It's
maybe
a
it's
55-65 issue.
that's something to think about. Yeah, that is a really good point. So that's something to think about. If pink tint is a problem, 77 it solves itself. And I agree, C2, 77, phenomenal deal because they look so similar. You don't understand. And when I spoke to LG, I was asking, hey, LG G2, are we talking brightness, like brighter? And he's like, it's all about the gallery series. It's less about getting more brightness and more about it's premium, it's wall mount, not perfectly flush, but near flush to the wall, right? And nowhere in our discussion, you say, oh, well, it gets a lot brighter. We see that it gets this much brighter, maybe it's special
moderately in very specific content.
very specific content. So the C2 ends up being the monster deal out there this year for
Although
sure.
gaming is the differentiator because of 1000 nit HGIG on the G2 versus 800 nits on the C2.
Yeah. And so my guy Ramak, technically, you're right. It is not a color filter, but it does, it plays the role of the color filter. In other words, it takes over for color filters. So the qd-oled quantum dot color converting layer is what they call it. It is technically not a filter, but it replaces the filter. So you guys can decide how you want to describe that. But instead of a color filter, it's a quantum dot color converting layer. And the mechanism is it does a better job than a color filter doing what it does, right? I cannot help. Is Soup crypto lights? So thank you so much for encouraging people to like. Here we go. Phone one classy. What TV would you pick between the QN90B and S95B and why? I got to go with the S95B because I do see differences in, for sure, peak brightness, specular highlights. QN90B cannot do that as well. Does it well for a non-OLED TV, and definitely black levels and definitely shadow gradient detail. Not as good as the A95K, but definitely better than the QN90B. And just overall HDR impact and the infinite contrast, you feel it in almost all content, the infinite contrast in dark and bright room. How about you? QN90B or S95B, and why?
Are you absolutely stuck on those two, or would you consider
A C2
a C2?
at 77 or 83 inches,
Yeah,
right?
or
Yep.
paying more for the 895. But like when it comes to the Samsung LCDs, like there was someone else who asked Dwayne, "Hey, is there a motion setting turned on the QN95B because its motion just
Yeah.
they are forcing whatever they are with their motion that just does
Yes.
not even come close." The way the tone mapping was negates any brightness advantage. I don't see a reason for it unless it's a most of the time very 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 bright room, and then
Mhm.
you want crushed but little blooming at nighttime. Then maybe. But
And
for the most part, I would say the S95B, unless you can get the G2 or A95K.
so here's something else, right? Let's say the S95B is 2400 right now, 65 inch.
Yeah.
And then you have the 83-inch C1 dropping to 3700. I'm hearing now, like it's just slowly start to drop. It's still not close enough, but definitely $3,700 83-inch C1 or the 4000 A95K. C1 or A95K.
I wouldn't get any of the 83s right now because of the uniformity issues, personally. And
So
honestly, the
77
size
still
difference isn't that big. I would go for a 77
G2.
C2 or G2.
Okay. Good points. And are we hanging out with any others? Yes, we are. I mean, obviously, we have to find out where everyone's hanging out. So we'll see. But yes, we're going to, I think Brandon's trying to lobby for a certain bar here somewhere.
Mhm.
Less walking, more standing in one place because the last time the walking was not good. But yeah, I'll be there and we'll be hanging out. I don't know who'll be running the stream when we're walking about, but I'm sure at least Brian will try. So that'll be fun. And here we go. This is the best comment. I'm not convinced. I'm going to keep my 46-inch EX500 for another year. Dude, keep it as long as it's working. Every year you keep your TV. The next year, it could only get better for the same price. So I am a fan of keeping it one more year for sure. And should we do two different shootouts, says SD. I think you should do two separate shootouts, one for OLED and one for LED. Two different animals, like a sedan versus an SUV.
I
not
think
wrong.
maybe save the time and do the day mode for the LCDs and then everything else that's reference for the OLEDs. So that's where it makes more sense.
And what about the fact that the 85-inch X95K performs better than 65-inch, 75-inch? You're right, Roka. The 85-inch does perform better. And I asked Brian about this over and over, and he says, yeah, I saw them both, and it is clear that the 85-inch has less blooming for whatever reason. We only have theories why that is. But then 65-inch is the most popular size. So unless you have an 85-inch shootout, you're going to have to put the X95K in the most popular bracket, which is the 65-inch size.
And slightly less blooming is still blooming in the first place. It still won't beat an OLED.
Right. That's another thing is blooming is still blooming unless you're in a super bright room and you don't notice the slightly lifted blacks.
Yeah, I mean, the reference tests are for a dark room for critical viewing, and that's just where OLED is going to win.
And now we're going to take a selfie with Caleb. Well, if I wait here long enough, Caleb might walk by and we'll just get him in here. We have so many selfies that have been funny, but they're not safe for work. So we were in Vegas last time we took a selfie. That's why. Let's see. It would be cool to see a shootout between Z9K, X95K, QN90B, QN95B, throw in a Vizio and make them all 85 inches, right? So that you could take full advantage of X95K. So that's something to think about. Well, you notice, so you mentioned Vizio. You notice Vizio this year just doing the towel. Even their best TV is like $600. They're like, you know what? We're not going to win the performance battle. So we'll just sell the most affordable TV we can and make money off of SmartCast. And I think that's what a lot of you, well, not a lot of you guys, but most consumers, they're not going to pay over $1,000 for a TV. I don't know how many times I've seen the comments. Who's nutty enough to pay $1,000 for a 65-inch? And here we are talking $2,000 65-inch, $3,000 65-inch, $4,000 65-inch. Vizio knows its market, and yeah, Vizio is no longer in the game if we're talking anything better than $1,000. They've thrown in the towel until I see differently. Okay, so hey, thanks Sean for that super chat. My next TV is totally dependent on the 8K shootout, but the judges have to be FOMO. Well, I'll be there. I'll let you know what I think. Classy and Brian. See, technically, we know these TVs so well, and Classy, unless we come in blind to be a judge, we can judge. We just don't add our commentary scoring into the numbers, right? Because the judges, they want to be like colorists and the people that are closer to the source, like the creator's intent. They want people more in the creator intent side, and we're more of commentators and stuff. But that's a good point.
And the other consideration is, again, this is really focused on darkroom critical viewing.
Yes.
Whereas I saw earlier he was interested in bright sports and no DSE. So what wins here may not win for him.
Right. Like we should have King of Sports TVs. You're right, Sean. There could be a King of Sports TVs, but then we'd bring in people who watch sports all the time, right? Viewers who are very critical of their, hey, can I see that ball moving fast? Right. I want fast moving objects. So you got to change the settings to maximize motion resolution, which is completely different than anti-stutter, anti-soap opera. Pink tint on the 83-inch G2? You say there was?
It's not so much the pink tint, it's the vertical banding, horizontal banding, the under 5%, like different parts of the panel kind of glows, like just weird uniformity stuff like that was addressed with the new pixel structure on, or at least on the 77s, that you hardly see anyone complain about the 77s this year.
Yeah. Okay, so MacGyver Mac, never listen to what the website says for your information.
Yeah.
As we know, people who write up the website,
They're dumbing it down in layman terms.
marketing team and legal team working together to make sure they don't get in trouble but get you excited. The engineering team doesn't even know what's on the website, honestly. So it plays the role of a color filter and it replaces it. So essentially they're thinking, oh, it's a color filter. You could say that it's the role of a color filter, right? But Nanosys and everyone else wants you to make sure it's a color converting layer. It takes blue, it converts it to the various rainbow colors, whereas color filter, it's less efficient in doing the same role, basically. I guess you could argue it's color filter, but most engineers will get on you for that. If I can get the A90J or the S95B for the same price, here's a good one. Would the S95B always be the better choice? Well, we know always. Let's take always out, but just generally speaking, A90J, S95B, which would you choose? Just
I've
all
now
around.
seen too many issues with the S95B that I would take most anything else. There are just too many things that we were seeing that were not even like a part of the scoring. Too many bugs. Like again, the big one, like the color gamut.
Mhm.
The way how much clipping there is, especially out of the box, not even after calibration. Like there's
Right.
just too many things like that. And then just also the firmware is constantly changing.
True.
The Tizen is terrible.
Yes. I've had the A90J. It's a wonderful TV. And again, my family, they're not going to notice the difference. I go with the A90J for their predictability, and you get the 83-inch option. You do not get that option with the S95B. So that's something to think about. And you are very welcome, Scott. Thank you so much. And oh, wait, Samsung is the best. Which Samsung? Samsung Display, Samsung Electronics. I have to say, and this is commentary for you, Samsung Electronics, you got to pay attention to QC. So we're here with some major review publications, right? We're not going to name names, get anybody in trouble, but they're like, we got our Samsung TVs and we had to return 2 of them for the local living book. I was like, welcome to my world, right? And this is a problem when you're sending these to major publications for review. So, but that's Samsung Electronics. Samsung Display deserves a hand. What they've done this year to help elevate Sony is amazing. Oh, what you got? Anything interesting?
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at the. You're good. Oh, okay. Switch sides with you.
Yeah.
All right. Very interesting results was that the LG G2 and SDR got crushed.
Yeah, that's
Like
what I've been hearing.
Right, but the DSC, I mean, the point difference though, there's over a 2-point difference on each of the different
Yes.
results. DSC in motion. What are the other ones? There was
See, that was like I didn't see the subcategories for the bright room.
well, one was DSE in motion, but I mean, you're talking about an 8.9 versus a 6.3.
That's-
motion test it failed because of whatever was going on.
Well, there's another 480 content, and it didn't get it because the 480 content wasn't looking good. I mean, it's like, but the point is that so 3 categories, averaging a total of 30, it got beat by 7 points.
Yeah.
So think about that. If you give up 7 points in 3 categories out of
close.
14, so 3 out of 14 categories, and you give up 7 points, you can't make that back.
Yeah,
That's a huge
The
difference.
weighting in the SDR bright room,
Yeah.
was too
See you
high.
tomorrow, brother.
When
Probably.
This is about reference
Well,
critical viewing.
And not just that, but I feel like I would have to see all the numbers of all the judges and double check the math. Not that I don't think that they could do math. I'm just saying it just seems abnormally low.
That's the problem with the 10-point scale.
Right. I don't think it's, I mean, like, honestly, I'd have a hard time going up to that and being like, okay, the DSE is literally out of 10, 2 points lower. That's pretty, like, that's, even if it was like, I didn't see it up close though. I don't know how significant it is, but it's a big, it looks like an abnormal, like, low. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying at least very heavily weighed on
And
that.
what I didn't get is for SDR bright room, shouldn't the X95K win? Wouldn't you
Well,
would think?
There we go.
yeah, I mean, but that has dirty, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, but the thing is, here's the thing though. All the other ones in SDR bright were all in the almost 9-point range. So those two, they crushed the G2 in bright room. Those two, they were 8.9, 9 point something. So in SDR, all 4 of the other ones were above 8.5, and the G2 was at 6.3.
So this
When
is
it came to the SDR bright, I mean, we saw the X95K and the A95K were clearly brighter than everything else. And
But
that
you don't-
should have been the heavier weighted thing for bright room viewing.
I mean, I don't know what should have been more and what should have been less, but yeah. Hold on one second. They need this TV.
Oh, okay. So here's the important thing.
Lower an inch.
We always say how great the G2 is, right? The scoring does not reflect that. If you look at the scoring, like, wait, did someone switch out the Vizio with the G2? I mean, it's so far behind that if you're just a consumer, you're like, well, I don't want a TV that's rated F, because that difference, you're not getting that difference in real content. Because we always say, well, the G2 is so close, you can't tell the difference. You look at the scoring, well, and you see that's the issue is, people have to take this King of TVs with a grain of salt. First, the winner is the winner, but then the separation between the winner as second and third, the G2 is not that bad.
Yeah,
But
like
I don't want to sound like an
if
apologist.
you just
either. It's just a good
remove
TV.
SDR bright,
Yeah.
then it was A95K with G2 less than half a point below.
That's just crazy. That
But then you add in SDR bright and it drops to third.
so we need to recalibrate these scoring. And so Sonola, thank you for the super chat. You deserve an answer. Any thoughts on rumors of the LG's MLA multi-lens array OLED? So I told the story earlier. LG engineer from Korea is here, so of course I jumped on him. I said, "Hey, MLA, macro lens array, is it coming?" All he could do was smile and say, "I subscribe to your channel." You know what? That smile is enough for me. Read it, read what you will, but they do know they need to do something, and it'll get brighter. But does that make that pink tints and the DSC worse? They're gonna have to fix other stuff too, because when you make things brighter, these artifacts become even more visible. You have to remember that getting brighter doesn't fix stuff; it also causes more problems. So, yeah.
And I did continue my VRR discussion with Sony. So I'll have
yes.
an update on that.
Wonderful.
But,
Did you start the Dolby Vision discussion with Sony?
no, I talked Dolby Vision with LG,
What did
but I know Sony just
yeah,
it's whatever.
it's whatever.
But the Sony is continuing to do more with VRR that no one else is thinking about, and I'll
Good.
cover that later.
Hey, finally, can Sony take the gaming lead? And maybe they're working with the PS5 to do something special. Who knows? And many of you ask, I know, can you ask Samsung why they did what they did with the recent firmware updates? Unfortunately, Samsung Electronics is not here. They're the ones that make that decision. Samsung Display, however, is here, but they're here to take all the praise because they're responsible for both #1 and #2 winning the QD-OLED technology. And Samsung Display will be unable to answer why these firmware updates where you pulled out down the brightness, why it came out. That's a Samsung Electronics question. And conveniently, of course, they are not here. And wait, SD still has the S95B? I thought you moved on, man. Yeah, I still have my S95B unplugged on 12/11. Yeah, so you're not going to get, what is it, that new update? Xbox Gaming is on the new 1302, right?
Yeah,
And-
the
and
cloud gaming.
Cloud gaming. The one cloud gaming? Come on, SD, you know it. You want it. And the funny thing is, so many people have been arguing with me about these auto updates. Well, if you turn it off, it's not going to update. I don't know how many people have had, including myself, auto update. Sneak in, you turn it off and you turn it on, it's there. Like, wait, did
Yeah,
it?
sometimes they do. Like
It
if it's
is.
connected to the internet at all, it'll force it.
It's been off, and that's why I tell you guys, I don't mind because that's what I do. Is okay, it's updated, great. If you guys want it off, you have to disconnect it from the internet. Just play it safe. I mean, if you want your streaming, get a streaming. Streaming. Did you put up your streaming review yet? All the different devices.
No, I have everything shot and stuff for it though. But if you want a quick highlight,
Quick highlight. So
Um,
you're gonna catch the details. He's gonna put up his comparisons of all the streaming devices. What have you reviewed? And without going into detail, which is your favorite two?
it's pretty much the Apple and the Shield.
Okay.
I mean, obviously the
so you got
price
the
and
Roku
everything,
and
but
the Fire and the sticks.
when it
and the
comes to
boxes.
those, just stick to the Fire and ignore the Roku and the Chromecast. Not necessarily those devices' faults, but
Mhm.
the actual apps that those devices are given from companies like Amazon, they
Mhm.
reserve their best version of Amazon Prime for the Fire Cube and Fire Stick. So
That's
if
interesting.
you're going to spend money on something, start with like a Fire Stick Max or a Fire Cube, and if you want to go premium, get an Apple TV or an Nvidia Shield.
And that's if you're watching. So if you're watching Prime content, you love your Prime Video.
And other apps do this, Crunchyroll and
Oh yeah.
whatever.
So all of their, you have to have it on their platform to get the best of everything out of the Fire TV. It has been on the Fire platform, and for sure the Prime Video looks best on their platform as well.
Yeah, because it seems Amazon is giving 8-bit HDR to the other devices instead of 10-bit like it should be.
And I think that's the greatest conclusion because I did not expect that. Right? That's kind of crappy of them. Okay, so we're gonna wrap up. The 5 minutes run a little bit. Have any questions? Let me know. And did the A95K meet your expectations? So just a quick review. A95K ran away with it across the board. They won everything. And S95B was number 2. And the biggest surprise is how far behind the G2 was in scoring, mostly because SDR daytime viewing was its weakness, its Achilles heel. And so maybe next year we need to recalibrate that so that it doesn't affect the scoring so much. Because if it wasn't for daytime SDR, it would probably be tied for second or close to second.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the real difference between the A95K and the G2 was the A95K skin tones were like 98% spot on.
Yes.
The G2 was also about that, but sometimes it was 100% spot on in the G2. Sometimes it would drop to 90% spot on.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to do that, to get the skin tones that good, you had to sacrifice white, which affects the walls and the water and the grays and everything else. And then you saw that red tint on everything.
And to be able to LG, this is the first year LG did it. In the past, or this is the first calibrators thought about that and did it, because in the past they would have lost even worse because the white walls would be perfect, but then the skin tones would be off a little bit, not enough red saturation. So there definitely are some compromises to be made. Not to say that the A95K was perfect. There was some content where like, wait, how did G2 have more red saturation in the hands, that dark scene? And both the QD-OLED A95K and S95B didn't do as well. And that's because there was just not enough calibration control to bring that red up.
I think the tone mapping, although can be adjusted on the LG, and we only got to see it with one setting, whereas it could have been, the tone map upload could have been changed and done differently on the LG.
Mm-hmm.
But the way the LG consistently tone maps is slightly better than Sony and Samsung as far as the accuracy standpoint, where you do get that HDR punch with the strong brightness. And then that oddity with the little artifact on the Sony, both of the Sonys next to the flag.
Oh yeah, I still don't know what that is.
The processing artifacts, like they're there, they happen.
Right.
There is some processing you just can't defeat on the Sony.
But you had to kind of walk up close to them.
Yeah,
From a distance, it was fine. And so, quick summary before we head out, you guys. I see the question: who won? So A95K won across the board. S95B was second. It wasn't a close second. It was just second, and G2 was a distant third, mostly because in SDR day mode, it just did not show well. And there's a lot of DSC issues with the 65-inch G2, as happened last year. It happened again this year. This year, though, it had pink tint, it had a few other issues. But ultimately, if G2 can clean up some of the DSC, it would be a lot closer, but doesn't mean it would win. So, yeah, we're going to be back tomorrow for the 8K shootout, everyone. So, still clapping for the G2. I thought the G2 did pretty good, actually.
Imagine there was a 77 G2 here and it didn't have
Oh,
the
if
issues.
only.
Then we were
if only.
comparing size and price involved.
Maybe next year we'll have the 77-inch QD-OLED against the 77-inch G2 or G3. So, all right, guys, thanks for checking in. We will talk to you guys tomorrow. Hope you guys have fun.
Yeah.
All right.